Hey, everybody, welcome back. We're going to spend the next 40 minutes talking this month about investigative behavior. And to those of you that don't know, Lynn has a book that goes into this in much deeper detail than we're going to be able to cover in this chat. And that's called What Horses Really Want. But anyway, feel free to post your questions. We had some cool ones come in ahead of time. This is such a great topic. I think it's one of those things in the horse industry that is really changing how we approach. The more we learn how their brains work, the more different our training approaches might look compared to 20, 30 years ago. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to see things shifting. So it looks like Lynn is connected and joining us, and she's going to lead us in this fun conversation. Hi, Lynn.
Hi, Jack. Yeah, so you want me to just go ahead and kick it off? I've got some slides here to show some pictures.
Yeah, I do want you to kind of just roll through I know you've got some notes and whatnot prepared, and I want to just give you free rein to do that. We had one last minute kind of question come in that I actually thought would help set the context for what we're talking about. Obviously, when we talk about fear, and maybe you're going to cover this in more detail, it can be a pretty broad topic. Some of us think immediately of horses spooking and being like outwardly afraid of stuff. Other times the horse could be demonstrating behavior that may or may not be fear. And that was one of the questions that came in, it sounded like a horse being reactive. It's a horse that every time it's ridden gets to a certain point in the ride where it kind of does a little buck and semantics, but it doesn't seem to the rider like there's anything it's visually looking at or afraid of. So that's an interesting case because to me, physical tension can manifest in reactivity. It's like when a person's really stressed out and uptight, little things set them off. And I think that is a separate conversation for another day, perhaps. But I did kind of want to set the context on what are we talking about in terms of fear. Is it just spooking?
Right, and that one I think would maybe depend on, is it the same geographic place that the horse reacts, or is it the same time frame in ridden? If it's the same time frame in ridden, I might think more in terms of a physical issue, like you were mentioning. If it's the same place, then there's something probably there that needs to be investigated.
Okay.
So that would be, and there's a lot of reactions that horses can do that can be difficult to tell. Is he reacting because he's tense, uncomfortable? Because we've had some trigger stacking where there's been one little thing bothered him, and another little thing bothered him, another thing. So it's not always clear whether we have a fear reaction and need to investigate, or whether there's other things going on. And a lot of times that can come down to how well do you know your horse? And if all else fails, trust your gut instinct, because if your instinct is to be sympathetic towards your horse, then probably you're on target with where you need to start with the potential issues. So I'm going to start on screen sharing because and you're going to just have me pause or whatever is.
Okay, so I see your slides. Yep, they look good.
Slides. Right. Okay. So we are constantly told horses are flight animals. I mean, who hasn't heard that? What we don't normally hear is that horses are also curious animals. This is natural to them because their wild ancestors couldn't afford to spook at everything. They'd spend their whole lives running. So they naturally investigate things. This is Tiger. He's a 5-month-old Dartmoor foal, and he has left his pasture but his owner opened the gate. He left his pasture with permission, left his mother and all of his friends to walk across the yard out of their sight to investigate this trailer. And while he's doing this, and this is one of the beauties of investigative behavior, is that he is learning. This is a cognitive learning process. So he's noticing everything from the way it smells, the way it looks, the way his hooves sound on the flooring, and the way it feels under his feet. So his first trailer ride was a total non-event because he'd already satisfied himself that this was a safe place. And because he was taken with his mother to a fun place, my place, as a matter of fact, for playing with agility. And horses are curious their whole lives. This is Sapphire. my husband's mare, who at 34 years old was still intrigued by this funky little bear sitting on a chair in her arena. And we can make use of this. What we see here is Bronze is poised between fear and curiosity. You can see he's leaning back. His front legs are braced. His hind end is ready for a quick getaway, but his focus is forward on the thing he's not sure about. And this is our moment where we can tip the scales toward the horse wants to flee or he wants to go forward and investigate. And this is where we have traditionally, people have gone wrong. We've been told if your horse stops, he must obey you. He must go forward when you tell him. And if he doesn't, then you need to apply more pressure to make him go forward. And the more pressure we apply, the more the horse feels trapped and the more he feels, I really have to escape. And so people think that a horse is going to always want to escape from something new and scary. So they want to condition him not to react. And we were talking about this before, Jack, about this whole process of de-spooking. And where investigative behavior is a learning process, de-spooking is meant to condition a horse not to react. So the horse is not an active participant. This is a passive thing. And it actually fit the scientific model from 25 years ago, because all through the 1900s, the scientific view was horses didn't have emotions. All of their behavior was based on instinct and conditioning. Of course, savvy horse people, we knew that wasn't true, but that sort of supported this whole idea of you can condition a horse not to react to things. But this doesn't generalize to any other situations anyway. So what do we end up with when we try to condition a horse not to react? Notice the horse's face. In addition to the hind leg, the face is saying, I'm not a happy camper. And we end up with a lot of really potentially serious problems. And you'll probably want to add to this list, Jack. I'm going to go back to this picture so we finish with this. This has been studied pretty well by behaviorists. And they find that when people cause horses to be afraid, and this horse is clearly uncomfortable, if not outright afraid, horses don't want to be around people who make them feel bad. Negative feelings mean they don't want to be with us, which, is pretty much how we feel about other people. If they create negative feelings, we don't want to be around them. So this can actually make a horse more fearful. It can also teach horses not to show fear. You keep waving the bag at him, and he finally figures out, okay, if I pretend I'm not afraid, if I hold really still, then you'll stop waving that thing at me. But then what happens is that when he's actually afraid of something, you don't get the warning signs. And you may end up with a horse who blows up out of almost anywhere, and everybody goes, well, where did that come from?
Yeah. And
in the worst cases, horses can dissociate from their emotions and just shut down emotionally. And there's a lot of behaviorists who feel that many or most horses really are in that state. So while people are looking to have a bomb-proof horse, sometimes what they end up with is a time bomb. Mm-hmm. And people are often told that it's a good thing to desensitize your horse. And sometimes I've heard people say, well, I'm going to really get ahead, so I'm going to desensitize my foal. Well, foals have a sensitive period for fear, just like, say, kittens and puppies do. So if you try to desensitize a foal during that period, you can make him more fearful for the rest of his life. So contrary to the conditioning idea, all behavior is prompted by emotions. We have negative and positive emotions. Fear prompts horses to avoid danger, but seeking or curiosity is a positive emotion. It motivates horses to explore. It motivates them to check out things they're suspicious of. And it also creates all sorts of feel-good brain chemicals. So independent of what they end up discovering, when horses are in seeking mode, they're feeling good. And if you're part of that curiosity or investigating along with them, then they like being with you. So it's all positive. So when the horse is in that poised moment, if we change the emotion to curiosity instead of fear, then we change the behavior. And here's where Bronze is poised between fear and curiosity. Is he going to escape or investigate? Bronze always goes for investigate because we've done that all his whole life. If you get a horse who has been pressured to walk up to something, if I pulled his lead line tight and said, no, you're going to march right up to that thing right this minute because I told you to. And when that's happened to a horse often enough, then he anticipates it. And so a lot of people don't see that they're curious because they just see the resistance of the horse anticipating pressure. So, Jack, did you have anything to mention here before we move on to? I have a few slides to show ways to encourage investigative behavior, to encourage curiosity.
Well, I think what ties in here is one of the listener questions that came in ahead of time. Basically, the writer had learned same way I did, which was don't, like if you're riding the horse, don't let it look at that thing over there that it's getting worked up about. Like just pretend it's not there, just carry on, keep the horse on task. So would cultivating investigative behavior turn that on its head to say like, no, actually, yeah, let the horse stop and look at XYZ? Is that what we're saying? Is it that black and white?
No, it's not really black and white, but overall, it really is almost a 180 shift. And I was taught the same thing. If there's something, don't look at the thing the horse is looking at. Make sure you look the other way to pretend you don't see it. But this doesn't tie into horses' natural behavior because when a horse sees something that is potentially dangerous in his mind, he's supposed to let other people know, or other individuals in his social group, he's supposed to let them know. And they're supposed to take notice. So if the horse is saying to me, there's something over there I'm kind of worried about, and I say, there's nothing there, he's like, what kind of leader are you? Because you are too clueless to even listen to me when I say there's something over there. Whereas if I say, okay, let me look at that. And if I see something, we can decide whether we want to investigate. Or if I'm convinced there's nothing there, I've looked, even if it's only 3 seconds, I've looked, I've acknowledged that he's concerned, and then I can say to him with great authority, I'm not worried about what's over there. Now let's carry on. And one of the things that people often bring up is, well, if I let my horse investigate all kinds of things, then isn't he going to just stop? Like, what if I'm at a show and he decides he needs to stop and investigate the judge's stand?
Right.
You know, or he needs to stop in the middle of the road when there's traffic coming. What I have found over many years is that if we routinely let horses stop and investigate things that they're genuinely concerned about, then when we say firmly, no, we can't stop this time, they take us seriously because we've trusted them other times. Now they're going to trust us when we say, not this time.
Mm-hmm.
So you feel that first slight hesitation is should I stop? And you close your legs and say, or you continue walking forward and say, we're continuing on, and they'll be with you.
And then similarly, just real quick, Lynn, I think there's probably an artistry to how riders or handlers would think this, because I think similar to what you just said, there is also the common perception that if you make a big deal out of something and the horse maybe wasn't that afraid of it, now they will become afraid of it because you're pretty worked up about it, right? And I think that that's
Yes.
partly body language and mentality. Like there's definitely a difference if the garbage truck is banging its way down the trail towards you. There's a difference between you getting all clenched up and anxious and being like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, here comes it, versus having this kind of relaxed, curious approach, like, oh, hey, here comes the garbage truck. I think you can certainly build something up to be an anxiety-inducing experience for the horse, but there's an artistry in how you handle yourself, I think. Is that accurate?
Oh, I totally agree with that. I think that's well said. And that's where a lot of people have difficulty because they naturally get anxious themselves when they're afraid that the horse is going to be anxious about something. And then that does say to the horse, oh, uh-oh, my person's worried. Maybe I should be worried. But yes, there's a huge difference between getting upset about something or anxious about it versus acknowledging, yeah, it's there, but good grief, that garbage truck goes by every week. And I mean, I've been known to go into long soliloquies about something that my horse is worried about while he stands there and looks at it and goes, geez, she's getting kind of boring. Let's just move on.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
So in terms of preparing a horse ahead of time, now, so we can come back later to what do we do when we're riding or leading and something pops up. But we can also encourage curiosity and build confidence by working with it under circumstances where we have a bit more control. And there's a few sort of basic principles that make it very effective. One is that moving something away from a horse makes him want to follow. Bring it toward him and he will naturally want to get away, but move it away and he'll follow. I found out the hard way that I had failed to introduce Shiloh to mountain bikes before I took her up in the woods. So having survived that incident, I invited a young student to bring her bicycle over to my arena and ride around the arena, and I let Shiloh follow her. And pretty soon Shiloh wanted to catch up to her, and when she caught up to her, Shara gave her a carrot, and pretty soon Shiloh decided bikes are not scary. In fact, they're something that might serve treats, and we probably better keep an eye on them in a positive sort of way. You can model curiosity. Sometimes if you get a horse who's been really shut down or has been punished for being curious or expects pressure, they may not show any curiosity. And so you can model it for them. And this is Opie, who came to visit and play with agility equipment. And he's looking at the cone that I'm looking in like, well, Lynn thinks this is interesting. Maybe there's something interesting in here. You can also let them stand and watch while a trusted handler handles the object. This is Opie's person, Melody, on the right. And she and I are setting up this seesaw so that it doesn't rock for his first steps on it. And you notice there's no lead on him. He's interested. He's just hanging out with us, watching. And Melody demonstrates. So again, there's no pressure on him. The lead's loose. He's not being asked to step on it. She's just walking across it, showing him that she's comfortable, but he's noticing all that. He's noticing the sound of it, the smell of it, and what it looks like. And then she offers him the choice to step on it, but no pressure. And this is where it's really hard for people who've been taught to be in control of their horses to let go of that pressure and say, okay, you can step on this when you're ready. And people often have a very hard time waiting for the horse to decide he's ready. And the more you pressure them, the longer it takes for them to get ready. So I have stood with my horses and looked at my watch. I know nobody carries a watch anymore, so pull your cell phone out and look at the time and watch the time. And 30 seconds can feel like a really, really long time when it looks like your horse is doing nothing. But I have never yet waited more than 7 minutes for a horse to step up and do something. And yet I've seen people fight with horses for half an hour over what they want the horse to do that they're making the horse too scared to try to do. When horses are checking things out, there's often pauses. Here, Opie's decided to put 2 feet on, but now he's gotten distracted and he's looking up the hill at my horses in the paddock. And so Melody just waits. She's not calling his attention back to it because often taking a break while investigating is part of the investigative procedure. It's like either they need a pause or they're waiting to see if something new develops. Lead's still loose. Now he's walking the rest of the way across. So if we look at the difference between Opie's body language that we just saw and the horse who's being despooked or desensitized, we can see even without looking at specific emotions, the important thing is the emotion positive or negative? And we can see the emotions on the horse on the left clearly are negative.
It was curiosity.
And horses don't learn well when they're in a state of fear. So what this horse is probably learning most is that he does not trust this handler who keep him safe and make him feel safe. Whereas Opie, off lead, has wandered around the arena, had a roll, had a run, and then has come back voluntarily to Melody. So if we think about getting in a tight situation with these horses, something goes wrong. Now, Opie's a driving pony, so it's really important for him to be reliable. Get in a tight situation. Which one of these horses is going to look to his handler and say, okay, I'm not sure what to do here. I trust you. Give me some guidance.
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to look for guidance? Or worse, if something really bad goes wrong, which one is going to risk his own safety to protect his person? And I know you've probably encountered this, Jack, and other people have reported it too, that that horses really will on occasion act against their instincts or even put themselves in harm's way to protect somebody that they are really bonded to.
Yeah, for sure. That is a very cool. And I guess right here, I had a little bit of a question, especially with can you go back to the previous slide?
Sure.
I know there's a lot of these clinics, and I can't speak broadly. I'm sure each of these individual clinics differs, but there are these desensitizing clinic or de-spooking clinics you can take your horse to and introduce them to a lot of stimuli, and I'm sure a lot of it is very positive. But I had emailed you beforehand. I just read this great article in Canadian Horse Journal this month. It's a great magazine if anybody wants to check it out. And there's an article in there on investigative behavior this month. And the author was sharing that, she's really changed her approach to foster investigative behavior. But previously, she used the model that many of us did, which was I'm going to expose my horse to this thing enough times that they stopped acting like a butthead about it, right? And she misread a lot of the cues the horse was giving her when she would expose the horse to different stimuli, whether it was a tarp or flag or whatever, because horses are so good at learning to cope that the horse learned to just kind of go inward and sort of like their nervous system got flooded in those moments, and so they would do a lot of calming signals to try to just cope. So there are a lot of the licking and chewing and lowering the head and basically just dealing with things, and that person misread those signals as, oh, they're having like an emotional release, they're getting, this is really positive, because many of us have heard that it's really positive when your horse licks and chews. But then what she would discover is, like the next month, she would introduce them to the same stimuli, and it was a huge, scary, like they hadn't gained any ground. And so I think that's an interesting conversation. Obviously, we don't have time to get into it, but we can maybe misread sometimes when horses are just coping we can confuse that maybe with the fact that they've gotten curious and then satiated that and soothed themselves.
Yeah, and I think that's the whole point of the difference between despooking and a learning process. The more freedom we give them, the better they're able to tell us if they're anxious. If my lead line is loose and my horse suddenly backs up to where the lead line's tight, he said to me, we're too close now, I need to get away some. And so my goal when I'm working with a horse around something is always my lead line's loose and I'm following his lead. I'm not saying, come on, let's go look at this. If he says, I got to walk, I got to circle around, I got to go further away, I've got to back up, I go with him. And this is the part people have so much trouble with. And then, as you said, Jack, people have been taught to misread so many cues, and the licking and chewing one is a big one. That really says, I've been stressed. And it's basically, instead of saying I'm learning something, I think it's pretty much saying I'm not in learning mode. I'm in coping mode.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. And I think the two biggies are making sure you know how to read your horse's body language and recognize when he's stressed and make sure that he has as much opportunity to escape as possible. Things that you can do loose, then as long as your horse has the option to walk away. Now, if you let him walk away, if he walks away and he has to do 10 laps around a round pen, that's not choice.
Mm-hmm.
If he walks away and you have to figure out how to entice him back off lead, that's choice. So yeah, I think that article sounds like a great one. I hope that you will
Okay.
post the link to that.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea. Okay, yeah, I will. All right, so
Yeah.
all right, we'll carry on. These are great slides.
Okay. So there's been very few studies actually in investigative behavior. The despooking's been studied heavily, and the pretty much the consensus among behaviorists is that it's pretty treacherous for the reasons that you said. But there was one nifty study of foals that showed that one great way to reduce fear in foals is to allow their mothers to investigate and get comfortable with a variety of objects before the foals are born. So you take the pregnant mares out and let them look at stuff, get comfortable with it. And then when the foals come along, the mares are taken out and go through the like across a tarp, have a plastic bag wiped on them, have an umbrella open to their head, and the foals are loose. Come back to that again. They have a choice. They're loose. They get to watch. They get to play with the equipment. And those foals then, months later, with no more than just that exposure, test as much more brave on standardized fear tests than foals who haven't had that opportunity. So this is Tiger again, and he just had some stuff put out in his paddock and had a chance to go and play with it as he pleased. The other study of horses and investigative behavior, and this was sort of a classic at this point, was Angelo Teleton, who teaches equine studies at Delaware Valley College, was an international level jumper rider before he taught there. And he did a study of horses who refused jumps. And so he had them retrained by allowing investigative behavior, and it was completely the opposite of what we've all been taught. If a horse approached a jump, instead of increasing and slow down in the approach, instead of increasing the pressure, the rider was to allow the horse to stop in front of the jump and inspect the jump until he was done. And then the jump was retried. And if the horse was too afraid to approach the jump, the rider got off and led the horse up to the jump, the rider going first. And if necessary, another horse came along for moral support. At the end of the 6-month study, the horses were tested by jumping them in a competition. And all of the young horses succeeded with no refusals. These were a whole group of horses who had a history of refusals. The older horses didn't totally get over the refusing, but they refused less often. And what happened was not just that those horses learned to jump the jumps that they were allowed to investigate, but they generalized the information. Jumps come in a set number of sizes, shapes, colors, materials, and so on. And so they generalized them to new situations. Now, my sister, in this picture is my sister and her horse, Oops, her event horse, Oops, from 1971. My sister was way ahead of this. She always trained her event horses by letting them jump lots of funky things at home that she let them look at first, low jumps, easy physically, but looking at all sorts of strange things. And when she took them out eventing in cross country, they never refused anything. They were able to generalize everything they saw at home to all the new things they saw out on the jump course, exactly like Teleton says.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And she says, by the way, she would never use that figure 8 noseband, but she says
Times have changed.
times have changed. Thank goodness. In some ways, it's good. Yes. You can take horses for Leadline Adventures. This is a good bonding thing too. You take them for a walk and just let them inspect anything that sort of strikes their fancy. And Brandy wanted to know what was in the recycle bin. And if you have a horse who maybe is like real fearful and spooky, and you're afraid of being too close to them when they're investigating, or you just want to have fun, you can set up a treasure hunt. And there's bits of food underneath those different obstacles. So the horses one horse was very, very fearful. And so Jackie put them out with another horse who was more confident. And when the fearful horse saw the confident one investigating and finding treats, he joined the fun. So this was a confidence builder. Do we have, and at our place, investigating is a way of life. You're allowed to be nosy and stick your nose into pretty much anything. So this is Brandy checking to see if the food fairy put anything in the muzzle.
You never
But they
know.
also understand that if, it's like when the vet comes and sets her box of equipment on the table, and no, you're not allowed to investigate that. And if you focus on things that the horse likes to do, that builds general confidence. That's a lot better than trying to focus on the things that he's not comfortable with.
Great. So we have
And
10
let him
minutes
play.
left, and Lynn, we have
Okay.
10 minutes.
So this is what I call the magic moment. This is Bella, who was afraid of almost everything. And here you see she's poised to scoot, but I just let her wait. And there's like 20 more slides here that I don't have here tonight, but in the sequence that show as she snuck forward, she backed up, she walked around, she came back, she walked around again, she backed up some more, and then finally Bella had her magic moment and was brave enough to touch the big bad scary ball. So this kind of comes around to the other question we had of somebody said she has a hard time with her horse. If my horse spooks at something physical that's not moving and I give it some space, I usually circle around a few times and let them investigate closer. But if I try this and they're really afraid, they continue to back away and get nervous, should I just leave the area or give it more time? The first thing I would say is make sure that you are not trying to direct the investigation. The really important thing is we need to be completely passive. And this is the hardest thing for most people. I went for a ride with a friend who wanted me to accompany her on her warm blood for his first outing out of the arena.
Mhm.
And everything went great for the first 10th of a mile. And then we got to a ditch that obviously could easily have walked over, but he was scared. Back and forth, side to side. 15 minutes, she did everything she was always taught to do. More pressure, leg, crop, everything. And all he did was get more revved up. So I said, here's an experiment, please, because I was really worried about her safety at that point. And 5 minutes later, he walked across the ditch like it was nothing. But she admitted the hardest part of that was sitting still and doing nothing, but just keeping him pointed at the ditch and letting him think about it.
That is hard. That's super hard. And there's a time and place. I think you would agree that a horse just needs to take a break, take a time out, and then you could come back in an hour or two. But if they get flooded with, flight chemicals, they're not going to end up in a curious state, maybe in that moment with all the other factors, maybe us and another horse, and who knows. I mean, I find sometimes if I can't get to that mode where I'm like, I'm just going to sit here while this horse freaks out. I think for both of us, sometimes I'm like, I'm just going to take a break for 10 minutes and I'm going to revisit this.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. A lot of us have been told that that's letting a horse get away with something, but it's not at all. It's acknowledging the reality of the situation. He's too scared to learn, and there's no point you're risking getting hurt over it. So just leave it till another time, come back, maybe get off the horse, maybe have somebody else hold the horse while you walk up to the situation or vice versa. Just make a plan that that diffuses the situation. And this comes back to the calming signals you mentioned earlier. When you're seeing calming signals, let the horse have that timeout and that pause, because that's what the calming signals are about.
And I know, and the value in doing all of this for folks is it really does change their brain and their brain chemistry. I mean, these are permanent shifts that you can help horses make. And that's really cool. And I know that you go into that a lot more in your book if anybody wants to do a deeper dive. But again, to me, that is the real value. It's not just about scattering little trinkets around your arena for the sake of, entertaining yourselves on an afternoon. It is really to help the horse cultivate what they do in nature, but getting to a place emotionally, neurochemically, where they feel safer, more confident, more part of the herd.
Yes, yes, exactly. That's a good way to sum it up. What I see is a shift from there's something new, it might be scary, I got to be on alert, and but their whole brain chemistry and outlook on life, they become more optimistic, and then the reaction to something new is more like, oh, something new, let's go check that out. It might be fun. So you have
Yeah.
a whole shift from pessimistic to optimistic, and that carries over into everything you do with a horse. And his whole relationship with you. If he sees you as the person who is part of good things that feel good, he wants to be with you.
And it also improves. I know we talked last time about Marianne Simon's new book, A Horse by Nature. But this work, this investigative behavior, is so important because increasingly trainers like myself are seeing like physical problems, so to speak, that crop up from horses that haven't cultivated, like if they're kept in stalls, they're just not exposed to enough. They lead sort of stressful lives if they go to competitions a lot. And what happens is they start having gait anomalies, vague lamenesses, performance
Oh,
deficiencies. So it's all tied together, just like us. Your nervous system, your brain state really governs how well, muscle function. And so I know I used to see photos of horses like sniffing tarps and kind of roll my eyes and be like, I'm a serious equestrian. Like I like to get on and ride my horse, right? But now taking a wider lens, it's like, wow, I work with a lot of horses that can't use their body, and this is a piece of the puzzle. It may not be the whole picture, but it's a big piece of the puzzle.
it really is. It's a huge piece. If a horse isn't comfortable in the world he's living in, then he can't really focus on the performance.
Yeah. Well, let's see. We have 2 minutes left. So, Lynn, will you tell people where they can find your book? And we're going to post this on YouTube as we always do. And listeners, feel free to drop your questions in the YouTube channel. Lynn and I do try keep an eye on that and answer questions as they come in.
Yes, and my book is available on Amazon. And if you check my website, it's also available in other countries, including Poland and Sweden and Great Britain and Australia and so on. So,
Cool.
yeah,
And it's called What Horses Really Want.
that's right.
Okay, super. Well, until next time, Lynn, this was so great. Thanks for the slideshow. That was fun. That was really great.
Thank you.
And we'll catch you next time. Till then, enjoy spring, everybody.
Yes, so long.